What if our schools could be more than just places of learning? What if they were spaces of liberation, belonging, and joy?
Intentional and purposeful focus on building a culture of collaboration is the secret for leaders striving to make a difference. In building a culture of collaboration, Kurtis and Lorna Hewson will share simple tips, ideas, and strategies to take your organization's collaborative efforts to the next level.
Welcome to another episode of Building a Culture of Collaboration. I'm Kurtis Hewson, lead learner and co-founder of Jigsaw Learning.
And I'm Lorna Hewson. We're joined today by Dr. Deonna Smith, a former teacher, school leader, and now a nationally recognized educational justice advocate. With over a decade of experience across K-12 and higher education, Dr. Smith has seen firsthand both the inequities that exist in our school and the extraordinary potential they hold. Her work is rooted in the belief that schools can be joyful, inclusive spaces where every student is seen and valued. That belief inspired her to complete a doctoral degree in education and social justice and eventually founded Deonna Smith Consulting, where she partners with educators across the country to create equitable learning environments.
She is also the author of Rooted in Joy, Creating a Classroom Community of Equity, Belonging, and Care, a powerful and practical guide to building classroom culture from a place of humanity and hope. We're so glad to have Deonna join us for this conversation. So welcome, Deonna.
Yes, hello. Yes, so excited to be here.
Yeah, so we really want to be able to jump right in and get you to share a little bit of a story. You had mentioned when we had connected a story that you've seen firsthand how school communities can be deeply divided and how we can shift that culture around joy rather than just focusing on data that really can help build genuine collaboration and connection.
Yes, yes. And so I always love to share this story because I've worked at a lot of schools that are, struggling, have a long way to go. But I've also worked at some really prominent, famous kind of charter school networks and really high performing schools that have gotten blue ribbons and all of this stuff. And I have found that regardless of the resources or the population or, the climate, there's some things that plague all of our schools. And I was working at a beautiful school. I mean, we had the teachers listening are going to be like, oh my gosh, where is this so I can go work there? We had an unlimited budget, an unlimited classroom budget, anything you wanted. You got to pick the curriculum that you wanted and they would pay for you to get trained. Beautiful building. We went on field trips every month. We had people come in and teach the kids Shakespeare. I mean, just all of the bells and whistles, right, that you can imagine. And it was a very, we had really strong data, our scores kind of spoke for themselves and folks would come from across the country to watch kind of how we did this. And at this school, I ran the math program. So I was the math department head. And we were very, very focused on scores. It was a very score test driven culture, which, did yield great results. But what I found when I actually went and visited some schools on the other side of town, less resourced, more challenging, I say in quotes, student population, a lot fewer opportunities. What was so interesting is I saw a lot of schools getting pretty much similar scores with a lot less resources. But when you walked in the school, it just had a completely different feeling. It felt alive. Kids felt excited to be there. They did not have the same teacher turnover challenges that we had. At a lot of the nicer schools that I've worked at, we have turnover challenges with leadership, this, that, or the other, right? And so I began to wonder, there has to be something outside that we're not yet measuring. There has to be something more that makes a school, a place where kids learn and thrive together, a place where adults want to be, where they're excited, where they see teaching as a calling and a vocation, where families feel welcomed in, where it just has this community connection, and a place that makes you feel good to be there. And I think we know both anecdotally and through research that when kids want to be at school, they learn more, right? They do better. And so I knew that there had to be an essence, a je ne sais quoi of something going on, right? And what really my research led me to understand was that it was about joy. So, this building that I
Mm.
worked at, although we had all the resources in the world and although we were known to be very good, we had a lot of anti joy policies.
Mm.
For example, our students were not allowed to talk during lunch because we wanted to focus on eating and get out to recess and then get back into the classroom. When I would do observations as the math department head, I wasn't looking for our kids talking to each other, our students collaborating. I was looking for, is the teacher teaching bell to bell? There's a big kind of buzzword. I don't know if they use it up there with y'all, but here they're big on bell to bell. Like you got to
Yeah.
be instruction bell to bell. Um, and so what I began to realize was we were not looking for joy. And
Mhm.
because our schools right now are so outcome oriented, if you are not specifically pushing in policies that bring joy, you probably don't have that joyful of a building. It's not going to
Mhm.
happen naturally. And so that was a huge lesson, really, that I learned there. And I was fortunate enough to have a school leader who had an open ear. And when I kind of explained to her, I was like, this is what I'm seeing other places. Like, I'm seeing kids
Yeah.
talking to each other. I'm seeing families like hang out at the school long after the car line is gone just because they're talking. We never, I'm seeing people wanting to come to the like Saturday family days or the family math nights. And the principal was willing to make some shifts. And it was amazing what we were able to see. Now, we already had pretty good scores, but our scores really went from like good to really, really solid, especially for our target populations.
Mhm.
And then we just saw so much growth in our school community, happier teachers, happier students, and
Yeah.
we were really able to turn the tide. So I say that to say, even if your school is really strong, you still might be lacking joy. It might be something that you need to focus on. And that joy is worthy of being something that we talk about in these conversations when we talk about the math data, when we talk about the attendance. Why not talk about joy as well in that conversation?
So
Yeah.
I'm curious, Deonna, how, in your experience and maybe even through your research, what have been some ways that you've gone about measuring that joy? As a school leader, if I'm listening to this and going, I'm sold, how would
Yeah.
I go to and start tracking this within my school?
Yeah, so I think it can look like a couple of different things. But one place I like to start is with the kindergartners. I always start with the little kids
Yeah.
because, I mean, if you look at a kindergartner, right? They love school, they love their teacher. They'll
Yeah.
write like notes saying how much they love their teacher. They're excited to be there. You know what I mean? They beg to go to school. They're super enthusiastic. Now you look at even a middle schooler,
Yeah.
they don't love their teachers. They're not always enthusiastic, right? They're like, you're really getting in the way of my me time right now by being in front of me, trying to teach me something. So I always start with the littlest kids in the building and I look at their teachers, I look at what they're doing, I look at their spirit, I look at their energy, because I think we have so much to learn because I'm a deep believer that our students have so much genius. They're so creative. They're so joyful. And it's really the school that kind of limits their creativity and their thinking. And so the more that we can get them before they've kind of been schoolified, right? When they've just kind of
Yeah.
been downtrodden by the American school system or the Canadian school system, the more we can look at them early and kind of see like, what is that like? Those are kind of the indicators that I like to start with.
Hmm.
I'm also big on asking kids, data,
Mhm.
surveys. And then a lot of the work I do, when I go to schools and I work with them, we vision set, like what do we want to see? And then we just do some good old fashioned backwards planning, just like
Hmm.
you would with your curriculum, right?
Yeah.
We want to see, families and kids excited about that. Okay, let's backwards plan. What would that look like?
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
love that. And Deonna, I did a lot of work in curriculum a number of years ago, and we always had that space where, I would work with K1 teachers and
Mhm.
the excitement and the energy that young kids bring to school, and they so want to be there. And then the reflection on working with, grade, even by grade 3 and 4, we're
Yeah.
seeing such a big shift between that energy and that
Mhm.
excitement that just over those such important years, begins to wane. And it is so sad that we lose that in that time. But in your work, you talk about joy as a foundation for equity and excellence. So, how can school leaders begin to center joy in their collaboration and collaborative practices and team culture?
Yes, yes. Thank you so much for that question and for all the work that you have done, because we need great curriculum people out there as well. I think that, I started really in my research began with joy, but again, I was doing a lot of joy work under the umbrella of asset pedagogies. So that's like your culturally responsive teaching, those kind of practices. And, for me, as I watched what was happening, especially, 2020, 2021, 2022, a lot of people were talking about culture responsive teaching. It was something that people wanted to do. And I think that one of the reasons why we haven't got the yield from those conversations that we wanted, because you think about it, I mean, every teacher in the country, and yours too, is probably thinking about like, how can we be more culturally responsive?
Yeah.
I think if we look at the data, I don't know that we have seen that yielded what we wanted it to yield, right? At least here, I'm not seeing the numbers. All of a sudden, our linguistically diverse learners are, now they're getting everything that they need, right? And all of a sudden, our schools are more equitable. And I think that one of the reasons why that didn't happen was because I believe that joy is actually the secret ingredient lever for change in that work. And so how I center joy in equity work is understanding that usually when we talk about like closing these gaps or, COVID learning loss or fighting against the attention span epidemic that we have, a lot of folks think that it's time to double down, more instruction, more rigorous things, more minutes, more. And I think that is just the incorrect way to look at it, because it's not an asset-based approach. And so I believe in using joy as an asset-based approach. Like, what are our children excited about? How can we get them engaged?
Yeah.
How can we make sure that we're actually celebrating what is already within them and making school a place where they can really thrive and cultivate in that? And so I think in this way, like, I've really seen strong transformation when people understand, like, we do still have to have an equity lens, regardless of whatever climate we're in. At the end of the day, if you're looking at your data and you have this type of student repeatedly not getting the outcomes that they need, not prepared to go to the next grade, let alone the world, you have to take a look at your data through an equity lens. You have no choice. Yeah. And instead of using a deficit practice of these kids can't, these days they just don't do this or that, the parents, we're in a very toxic kind of parent teacher war right now. That's very discouraging for me to see. Instead of looking at that, I propose that we start with building a culture of joy. And that has to start with not only student culture, but also adult culture.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so we talk about like, are teachers joyful? I created a 4-part framework. And the first component of that is I am joyful. I mean, it sounds like a silly question, but we have to start with our teachers. Are they happy to be at school?
Yeah.
Do you want to talk to your colleagues? Are you excited? Are you feeling enthusiastic? And it's kind of simple, but I think sometimes we lose a little bit of that. We lose a little bit of the human element of like a teacher that's a human being that needs to feel excited. And then the next thing that we talk about is, are kids joyful? And so I think school leaders and teachers alike can start with reflecting on, are we joyful? And then especially from a leadership perspective, it's really about finding barriers to that joy and making it your business to break those down. Yeah. So I do a lot of like changing policies that exist just to exist, right? Yeah. I do a lot of mindset work of like, let's change our mindset, because realistically, 36-year-olds are probably not going to do exactly what you want them to do all at the same time. So that doesn't mean that you have a bad classroom, right? I had a school last week where, we started with, here's our mindset shift around talking. Like, a noisy classroom is not a bad classroom.
Right.
At that school, it had been like kids sitting quietly is kind of our North Star. Okay, we need to unpack that. Because I say whoever's doing the talking is doing the learning.
Yeah.
So I need my kids collaborating in the same way that I need my adults collaborating, right? So we're talking about what kind of white space do teachers have to sit back and plan and engage with each other? How are students learning together? So there's so many different ways that you can approach it, which makes it exciting and fun, I think. But it really starts with, from an adult perspective, thinking about, are your adults joyful to be at school? Are your kids joyful? And how can you as a leader break down those barriers and really develop kind of a plan and a process for that? Because that's the other piece. Joy can be a little, it can be a little out in the open. We're like, we want to be joyful. Okay, sure. And then I have to say, okay, how are you going to do that? What are your indicators? What are you looking for? Right. It's kind of like, it's not as fun as just being like Miss Frizzle every day, but we do need some structure with our joy. So we got to bring that in.
I'm so happy to, well, obviously the title of the podcast is Building a Culture of Collaboration. Yeah. We're big proponents that it's hard to accomplish the joy that you're speaking of when people are working in silos or in isolations. As human beings, and you talk about the adults in the building, the adults need to be connecting, collaborating, feeling together. I really think that's critically important.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I think about joy, and I agree with you, it's kind of a nebulous idea.
Yeah.
Like, we all want to be joyful, but how do you make sure that that's happening in a school, right? But I think the foundation behind that is connection, is how are we connecting with each other as human beings? And that's both the adults and the children.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, we talk a lot about, especially if you guys are into the latest research coming out with child development, everyone's talking about isolation. Everyone's talking about how, we have our iPad kids, we have kids that they're not going out. I mean, at least I'm in LA, so it's not a quaint little town. So we don't have as many kids like out in the yards playing. Right. But we have a lot of information about how connection is impacting our young people. But it's our adults too. I mean, our teachers went through COVID too. They went through isolation too. So I think as a visionary leader, you have to be responsive to that. And you have to know that it's not going to be like the old days where like you just naturally come to the coffee room in the middle and the teachers are just hanging out. You have to be more intentional than that. You might have to scaffold your adults into building collaboration. You can't just throw them in a room and say, this is your grade level meeting.
Absolutely not.
You gotta guide people. So that's my biggest message to school leaders is like, hey, we have to bring this human element. And it's almost like you have to teach people and retrain people how to be in community, how to collaborate, not take any of that for granted. And that's okay. That's okay that we have to do that because it's a very important thing for us to spend time on. I think it's worthy of our release time for sure.
Yes. So, Deonna, I'm interested. Have you encountered any schools that have gone too far, in your opinion, on the pendulum of we only focus on joy and we lose some of the rigor? Like I'm assuming from what you were sharing is there has to be a balance there, that it's not, okay, we don't need a curriculum. We just need to have fun every day.
Yes, always do that swing in education, right?
Yeah. We do. We love a pendulum swing. And now I've been in here long enough where I'm like, wait a minute, that sounds like something we did. So we love to do that.
We'll be right back to continue this episode. Are you feeling alone when it comes to addressing the needs of students in your classroom or in your school? We realize that every child has their own unique set of needs. How do we possibly attend to each and every student in each and every curricular area and in each and every circumstance? Simply put, you can't do it alone.
We were feeling the same way in our school, but we were determined to find a different way to support the needs of each and every one of our students. Through much trial and error and studying the current research on professional learning communities, response to intervention, and much, much more, we developed a framework that would support not only the students in our building, but every staff member as well.
Collaborative response is a framework with 3 essential components: collaborative structures and processes, data and evidence, and continuum of supports. With careful implementation of these intersecting pieces, your school can live the belief that every child deserves a team.
Get the introductory chapter of our best-selling text, Collaborative Response, 3 foundational components that transform how we respond to the needs of learners for free. This chapter also includes a link to the companion website with numerous resources and templates related to the framework.
Go to bit.ly/C R-intro to access the chapter. That's bit.ly/C R-intro. Join the thousands of schools implementing collaborative response and seeing incredible levels of success for all students. And now back to our conversation.
And I've worked with a couple of schools that the intention is so good. The intention is there.
Yeah.
They want to be joyful. But here's the other piece of equity work that we have to grapple with. If you want to be joyful, yes, that's really important. And it's a both and. You have a responsibility to make sure that your babies are leaving that classroom ready for the next grade and ready for the world. And so sometimes I have seen teachers that not just over with joy, but I would say over, I don't want to say accommodating because that makes it sound like it's related to special education, but they are over emphasizing all of the challenges that our students go through, right? We need too much joy. They're really lowering, in a way, even though they're not seeing it, they're lowering their expectations of their students. Because then it becomes, they hear what I'm saying. Like, you're right. Our kids did go through COVID and they did have these challenges and it is rough. So, we're just not going to, fractions is just a lot for them right now. I'm like, you are a fourth grade teacher. Like, it doesn't matter if it's a lot or a little, it's happening. I don't know what to tell you, right? There's things that have to be done. And so I think that's such a great point. Because I don't encounter as many of those schools, but I have worked with a couple schools where I'm thinking I got to come in and help everybody build joint connection. No, they got it. They got it. It's actually, I have to come in and say, here, this mindset that your students can't, right? This mindset that because you are in a, low income community, or you have a lot of linguistically diverse children, or you have a lot of newcomers. A lot of times I work with schools, especially in California, we get a lot of newcomers, new to the United States last week type of thing. But at the end of the day, you need to believe that that student can learn, and you need to believe that they deserve a classroom that is joyful, but also that they can thrive in. And kids can't thrive in utter chaos, right? So you have to find that balance there. And I think usually it comes down to understanding what I don't like to call it behavior management because I don't believe in managing it. I think it's about creating a classroom community. But in my book, I talk a lot about an ecosystem. And so your classroom is like a little baby ecosystem. Yeah. And in the same way that if you introduce too many of one animal to an ecosystem, it can also throw it off. Yeah. There's a delicate balance. So if you all of a sudden are like, oh, I feel bad that my kids, have to, they like screens. So I'm just going to have them use screens all the time. Or I don't want them to have to do this because they're struggling and I'm uncomfortable seeing them struggle and doing things that are hard, right? So you take out all of the rigor. So there can be swinging too far the other direction. Like I say, I see that a lot less. But with those schools, it's about, if we're talking about joy, equity work, and believing in our students, you have to believe that they can do well. You have to believe that, you can be an excellent teacher instead of just consuming all the negative stuff about education. Yeah, all of that is true. But do you believe that you can be a good teacher despite the challenges, despite families having all these complaints, despite all of these things, right? So in that way, it's a lot of mindset work. And so I would say, if you're listening, you're thinking, oh yeah, my classroom's super joyful. Nobody has a chair and we run around all day. I would also say maybe you should read Root and Joy because it sounds like you need a little structure. And that's okay too.
I love that idea of an ecosystem because you're right. Too much of one thing or another, just like
throws it off.
Environmental ecosystem throws things off balance. I love that idea. So your book, Rooted in Joy, blends theory, story, and practical tools. What are some of the key takeaways that you would want leaders to take from that book when they're building inclusive, collaborative classrooms and school environments?
Mm-hmm. Yes. I think that especially if you're a school leader, if you look at your ecosystem and you see your ecosystem is unhealthy and a little bit out of whack, And the same thing that they do in real life, right? If there's too much of, there's too many mice, they'll introduce some more predators, right? Which is hopefully there's no mice in your classroom. I worked in a couple schools where we did have mice, but that's another story. So if your ecosystem is out of whack, you need to have an intervention. I mean, that's just basic science, right? Sometimes you need an intervention. And so as a school leader, you have to say, if things are falling out of balance, I need to think about what I can do proactively and reactively to get this place back on track. And sometimes that is a lift, and it is a lot. And it takes some step back time, but it is important to do. Another huge takeaway that I hope people walk away with is it's not just about your behaviors, it's about your beliefs. So I can come into a school and they'll say, hey, Deonna, train our teachers. And I can tell them exactly what to do. And they will do it when I'm there. And then they will close the door and do whatever they want to do as soon as I leave. So I am big on, we're not just talking about behaviors, we're talking about beliefs. I need you to believe that all of your students have genius and belong in your classroom. I need you to believe that you can do hard things. Teaching is hard. I need you to believe that you can do it. I need you to believe that kids deserve joy, and it's not something that should be earned. We don't get joy at the end of the day if we were perfect and we sat and we stood and we did all of the things. We just deserve joy because we're human beings and it helps us thrive. So there's a couple of beliefs that I need people to get to deeply understand so that their behaviors can change, because your behaviors are a reflection of your beliefs and your values. Yeah. So I would say those are really two of the major things. So the structure of the book is a whole chapter is just on mindset shifts. And this is, told with teachers that I've met, teachers that I've experienced, and a lot of my own experience. Because I always say, y'all, I was this teacher in a lot of ways. I had a lot of challenges. I started off teaching when I was 21 years old. I don't know what they were thinking, but they gave me a classroom, right? And I was kind of like, okay, you're sure. And so I felt like I had to be like really tight ship. I was always a teacher that people would come to my room to see the behavior because it was really, really like locked down. And I was a very authoritarian teacher. Like I was leaning way towards more Trunchbull instead of Miss Honey. And I had to really learn, like I was snuffing out all of the joy. I realized that I was kind of, sucking the life out of my students in this really strict environment. And so I say that because I think sometimes teachers don't recognize, like, if we are experts, it's because we have messed up a lot of things. Yeah. Like, I made a lot of mistakes. Believe me, everything that I'm talking about in the book is mostly things that I've done, but when you know better, you do better. So I learned. And I always like to tell people you can tell that I've been on this journey because I have a pretty big social media presence. And my students will be on there, and my students will come and be like, yeah, Miss Smith, she was real strict, right? So I'm like, I can't be dishonest about what I was doing because my students are all on social media. They will comment and tell on me in a minute. So I like to tell people, it's okay if you're having these ups and downs and struggles, because the book is a lot of my own experience. And then I was fortunate enough, for some reason, when you're a good teacher, they try to promote you to an admin, and it was a trap. Because I was, I want to hang out with the kids. No way. But as a school leader, I learned a lot of this too. So the book includes a lot of stories from that practice. And then, a lot of just research, because I do believe that we have access to best practices. We know what can work. We have so many people in the field of education that are doing research. So I wanted to elevate that a lot too, because I think when we get in our classrooms, we get kind of divorced from the research of education. We don't really get to look at it. So I wanted to bring some of that into the book as well.
Yeah, that is so fantastic. And you are definitely speaking our language, because in our work, we say the same thing, that we made so many mistakes along the way. And that's how we learned to do the things that we do now, and which is such an important part. It's an important part to share with your staff too. So just thinking on the lines of advice for leaders, Deonna, what are some of the things that you would suggest to a leader in terms of getting started? Like, where do we even start when we realize that this is the situation within our building? How do we start to shift our beliefs and shift our thinking, those mindsets, when we're trying to focus on joy?
Mm-hmm.
We'll be right back to continue this episode. Is your team stuck spinning their wheels, frustrated by challenges outside their control? We know how easy it is to focus on external barriers, especially when it comes to student success. But dwelling on what we can't control drains our collective energy and limits our impact. That's why we created the Locus of Control Workshop Guide, a powerful tool to help your staff shift their focus to what is within their control. For just $9, you'll receive a ready-to-use facilitation lesson plan for a 20 to 30-minute team discussion, a digital locus of control organizer to guide the activity, step-by-step instructions, next steps, and extension ideas to keep the momentum going. Through this activity, your staff will identify the key challenges affecting student success, determine what they can control, influence, or must let go, and create a lasting visual reminder to reinforce the solutions-focused mindset. This guide has already helped school teams prioritize effectively, reduce stress, and build a more proactive work environment. Get your copy today and help your team focus on what truly matters. Search under the Resources tab on jigsawlearning.ca to get started. And now back to our conversation.
Yeah, that's a great question. I always believe in starting with just kind of stepping back and reflecting. I mean, and I know we kind of get some flack for doing the like, what's your why kind of questions. Like I know teachers don't like those all the time, but I love to do those kinds of step backs and reflections because more than likely you became a school leader because you wanted to create like the kind of school that you would have wanted to go to, right? There was something in you that thought like, oh, this is going to be a great place for kids and adults to like learn and grow. And this is going to be so cool. And probably what happened is that instead of doing that, you're probably like doing a lot of paperwork, sitting at your desk, putting out fires, doing meetings and stressing out about your budget. So at some point we have to figure out how to get out of that space, out of that reactive space. And it's the same space that our teachers get in. I say we just playing whack-a-mole all day, ripping and running through the school building, putting out fire. It's like, no, you got to step back and get into a proactive space and really start to vision set. And that starts with reflection. Usually when I work with leaders, we just walk the building all day. We're not doing official observations. We're noticing, we're wondering, we're experiencing, we're following, like what is a day really like from a student's perspective, right? How many times are they being spoken to in an encouraging way versus how many redirects do they have? What do we see when we go into the break room? Do we see teachers hanging out? Are they complaining? Are they collaborating or co-collaborating? And then my mentor taught me that I love. So I see a lot of co-collaboration sometimes. So just stepping back and really seeing your building will illuminate a lot of next steps for you. And I always break things down, right? Like there's going to be some quick fixes, like when you go in, it's like, okay, this is an easy shift. I see that, all of my teachers don't have a 5-minute break at least to walk around the building and get some sunshine. So that's a quick fix. I can just move around supervision. But then there's going to be some bigger challenges, like things like maybe the schedule. You might have some major culture shifts that are going to take time because you're going to need to bring in folks who can train your teachers on this is how you create joyful classrooms. This is how you build collaboration. So there might be some bigger things. But I like to encourage people to find some like small, medium, and large solutions so that you get some quick wins and feel like you're building some momentum. And then you can identify like, hey, these are some big things, something I'm going to work on this year and something I'm going to plant the seeds for next year. And I think when people will be listening to this is a great time because they'll have like some break time coming up, right? Mm-hmm. So I would say step back and really start to think about that.
Yeah, I love that. And I think you're right. The reflection piece is such an important part of it. And I'm wondering if it's important to have an outside voice or vision along with those leaders to take that walkabout in their school, because sometimes you can only see what you can see.
What you want to see.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, there's a lot of confirmation bias that can happen. And it's so true because you don't know what you don't know until you realize it. And again, we can be so isolated in education. Like what really opened my eyes, like I said, I would have worked at the story I told you at the beginning. I would have worked at that school where we had silent lunch and kids had lines that they had to physically walk on all throughout the hallways at all times. I would have been there the whole time thinking like, oh yeah, this is the place to be. Had I not gotten out of the school and went to a different school. So sometimes
Exactly.
you need someone to say, like, here's what it can look like, here are the possibilities, and help you look up from kind of being in it all day, every day. And so I think that that can be really helpful. Sometimes as leaders, we have a hard time investing in ourselves and investing in our community.
Yeah.
But what I find most of the time is it's not a will gap. It's not a will gap, it's a skill gap. People
Yeah.
want to work in these places. You want to be a good school leader. Your teachers
Yeah.
want to be great teachers, but it's literally the skill. I mean, how are you going to do it if you don't know how to do it? Then no shame in that.
No.
But that's not really what they're teaching us in our preparation programs. So sometimes you need
No,
help.
that's true.
You could have an admin credential. That doesn't mean that you know any how to really do any of this stuff. So sometimes you do need extra support for sure.
Well, and I think that's that. Again, I go back to what you had said about mindsets of being that continuous learner.
Yeah.
Whether I'm in a classroom or leading a school, constantly seeking out, okay, what else? What else do I need to know?
Yeah. Yeah.
What other skills can I build upon?
Right, right. Yes. I hope people hear that as something that's exciting.
Yeah.
If people say like teaching, you never get perfect at it. I think that's great. Great.
Yeah.
We always are doing, there's something more to learn. We're growing we can feel our brain growing and expanding with each year. That's something to be excited about as opposed to be intimidated by. So that's a mindset shift I try to have with younger teachers. They're like, oh, am I ever going to be perfect at this? No. You're not.
No.
You're learning. So let's have some fun while we're doing it.
We often say if you think that you've arrived, then you're probably in trouble.
Oh yeah. That's when you know you made a wrong turn.
Yeah. So Deonna, love for you to share. How can anyone that's listening who wants to learn more, how can they get a hold of you? What are the best ways to be able to get in touch and learn more about the work you do?
Yeah, and I would love to first offer everybody, all of the listeners, a freebie, and it is a joy freebie. So that will be linked in the show notes, and you'll be able to grab that because I can't come all the way over here to virtually to Canada without bringing a little something for you.
They will be thrilled.
Yeah, I have a little freebie for y'all, so check that out. And then also my website is deonnasmithconsulting.com. Pretty simple. And there I share a little bit about what I do. And I also have a blog with tons of free resources. And I send out a resource roundup and kind of tone set for the week message every Monday. And that's just a way for me to stay connected with the community and for folks to kind of get some encouragement and some ideas. And so I'd recommend joining that community. We call ourselves the Joyful Teacher Club. So join the Joyful Teacher Club. And yeah, I work with, like I said, schools and organizations pretty much everywhere. So if that's something that we could connect on a little bit more, I would love to hear from y'all. And then you can also just find me and learn more about my work on Instagram. It's just my name at Deonna Smith. And then I do have a YouTube channel with some videos. I don't have as much time as I would like to keep her updated, but there's some really good stuff on there. And it's called That's Just Good Teaching, because I'm a big believer that a lot of culturally responsive practices are actually just good teaching. And so when people understand it like that, sometimes it's a little bit more approachable. So check out That's Just Good Teaching.
Oh, that's so awesome.
Well, Deonna, thank you so much for making the time to be able to chat with us. And we have loved this conversation. And as you mentioned, we'll make sure to put all of those connections into the show notes as well.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you guys for having me. I'm a big fan of what you guys do. It's kind of serendipitous that we were at the same conference at the same time. So I love this kind of stuff. And I'm so excited to also learn more from y'all as well, because I think our work just blends really well together. So
absolutely.
Absolutely.
I totally agree.
For anyone who's been watching, or if you're listening to the audio version, you didn't see Lorna and I nodding just about the entire
lots of nods.
Thank you so much, Deonna.
Thank you, Deonna.
Thank you.
Well, I absolutely,
yeah.
And I cannot, you and I both align with that idea of we need joy in our schools.
Yeah. For sure.
We talk about a student experiencing joy, and that school's not a place that you can dread or that you should dread. No. But think of it from a staff perspective as well. Why would we want to create places where people don't necessarily want to be there, or the most exciting thing about the week is the weekend?
Well, yeah, and the drudgery of getting up every day to come to a space that you don't enjoy. And that's, we absolutely don't want that to happen for staff or for students. So her focus on joy was so fantastic and so refreshing. And I loved. We asked her, where do you get started? And she said, well, we start with kindergarten.
Start with
and
the littles.
If any of you know me, that often is my space of, if all teachers could watch what happens in kindergarten, they would make some adjustments in their classrooms, because there is so much joy there just naturally because of where the students are. So how do we carry on that feeling of joy, and how we encourage that joyfulness all the way through?
Well, and some key takeaways for me. She's not the first guest that we've had on this podcast that talk about the importance of reflection.
Yeah.
Our friend Darren Peppard talks about leading from the balcony, the idea of stepping away to be able to go and reflect, think about where we're at. Are we accomplishing the vision that we have in place? And so I really loved her idea of start with self-reflection. Great. Yeah. James said the same thing of, when we're thinking about impacting collaboration, you start with yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And many of you have taken your master's, and you know that a good component of the work that you do through your master's is reflection. And we just don't, as educators in a school, either teaching or leading, you are you just don't have enough time, or you don't make time for that reflection, and really being able to step back for a moment and just think about what is happening and what does it look like, and how do we make adjustments to, really encourage, again, this podcast really about joy.
Well, and I loved her idea too of thinking about your classroom and your school as an ecosystem. And the idea that a healthy ecosystem has balance, and it's not either or thinking, it's and that we need a focus on outcomes and learning, and looking at joy, and trying to get that balance for a really healthy. I loved her idea of that ecosystem, how we have to make sure that it's in balance.
And practically, one of the things that we do through our work in encouraging that is our celebrations. At every team meeting, that you start with celebrations, because that is about reflecting on the great things that are happening in our school, or in our work, or in our building as admin, and how do we express that and note, again, a type of reflection about the successes that are happening.
Absolutely. So we'll really encourage people, check out the show notes so that you can see that freebie that Deonna had talked about, and also to make any of the connections or access the resources that she is providing. And with that, we wish everyone all the best. Please like, share, subscribe, and we look forward to bringing forth another episode of Building a Culture of Collaboration. Wishing you all the best.
See you soon.
Jigsaw Learning, founded by Kurtis and Lorna Hewson, is a team of educators who work with schools, districts, and educational leaders to establish collaborative response to ensure success for all students. Because every child deserves a team.